Welcome to the Awesemo Early Bird Podcast. It's your old pal EMac coming to you with Thursday, MLB Thursday, September 24th. I'm joined by Greg Ehrenberg. We have two games at 1 o'clock. For an early slate, we've got three games in the 6 o'clock hour, and then we have a six-game main slate. We've got Thursday night football. We've got action. We've got Greg. What's going on? It's been like a whole week since I talked to you.
Yeah, we've got a lot of stuff going on. I mean, you had family stuff, and then I've had to move my schedule around for a couple of things. So yeah, we just haven't really linked up, and we've been a staple over the last couple of weeks. We do like 80 shows together a week, and it just the timing hasn't been right lately.
It was definitely kind of funny, but here we are. We are finishing up our final Thursday of the regular season for baseball. It feels like it went quick because it did, but we have on Tuesday, the postseason will be starting. We have a 4-game slate, two 8-game slates, and then it goes back to 4. And however the series play out, those first series are best of 3. So we could lose teams quickly, or we could, have one extra day or two of quite a few games. We'll see how that plays out. But we've got basketball wrapping up here as we head towards the NBA championship. We've got hockey winding down, NASCAR still going strong, UFC this weekend, and then of course golf on Thursday. You definitely want to check out the golf content here. We have single slate contests, and over on DraftKings they do single day and then they do afternoon contests. So and plus weekend. So every golf event has 10 slates. Kind of crazy how they've cut that up, but I actually do like I've learned I like single game golf, and I like single day golf, and I like single game EPL. I would have never guessed that, but for me, it just makes more sense. I don't know why. I don't like it for basketball. Really don't like it for football, even though we do all the content and all the shows. I feel like there's so much more overlap than there are for some of these more niche sports, in my opinion, for those. So it's kind of interesting. What's your take on the single slate stuff? Do you like it? Do you not like it?
So it depends. There's individual basketball slates that I like that are single game slates. The one on Wednesday night I didn't particularly like, just because we have the Gordon Hayward situation with him coming back from Boston, which then basically kills all of the value on the Celtics end. And the other thing we get to at this time of season in the playoffs is the rotations are so condensed that it's, teams are only playing 7-8 guys for most of the game. It just makes it really difficult to find value on the slates. And then there's a lot of overlap with everybody kind of rostering the same players.
Yeah, and that's where I run down on it as well. But even though we think all of that, on Monday night, I mostly played DraftKings, Alvin Kamara was like only 30% in the captain spot. Like I played multiple 3-mans where I was the only one that had him in the captain spot. I played a bunch of head-to-heads where I was the only one that had him in the captain spot. I thought he was going to be, in those formats, was going to be like 60%. And he wasn't. It was completely shocking to me. So I guess, we can't project everything, even though we'd like to see it, but there is still a little bit of edge. I think things tighten up as we get deeper into the season, but for now, people are still just getting their sea legs. So you can definitely check that out. I bring this up because we have the NFL Express package. So our Express packages are something that are $3.95 a week, and this is something Alex developed because he said, I want gamers that are only playing, on the weekends or just 3 or 4 times during the week to be able to have some nice content, be able to construct a lineup, have a fighting chance, throw in a couple contests, and then just kick back, have a beer, enjoy, relax, hide from the family for a little bit, etc. So that's what he was trying to do. And he said, I think our NFL package might be a little light. So what I want to do is add in all of our showdown player projections and ownership projections. So that's $3.95 a week, no special promo code. That's just what it's going to be going forward. But if you play all 3 of the main showdown slates, which we're giving the projections for, that's like $1.30 a slate for that information. Well worth it, even if you're only playing about $10. A lot of good stuff in there, a lot of good free stuff. But here's a chance you can kind of slide behind the paywall, check out some of the really good stuff. It's very, very helpful. So I thought that was pretty cool, Greg. Not a bad
so I'll say terrific, and good transition by you two to weave that in. That was very, because I didn't even realize what you were doing there, getting to it, and then I realized halfway through I was like, that EMac, pretty sharp tack. He knows what he's doing over there. He's been around the block. He's done. This might be true. You may have hosted more shows than anybody in the industry. It's probably it might be you, right? Who else has been there?
Shows and podcasts, yes. I think it is probably me. However, if you include Sirius, then there's a whole, obviously, Jeff Mans and Dan Bach and our own Laffy. Quite a few more get there for that, because they're doing it just as consistently, but more in that platform. But I would say I'm definitely up there, because I've also had the advantage of having hosted shows since 2012. So
yeah, that was what I was going to say. You're one of the. Listen, when you guys don't even know this. When this started, EMac was 25 years old when he first got into DFS. It was a totally different ball game. He had a full head of hair, a full afro, and now he's a little older, a little bit. Look, a lot of time has passed. EMac invented the industry, according to some.
That is true. Well, part of it. I was younger. That much is true. I'm not so sure about the rest. Goatee's gotten not gray. It just skipped straight to white. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Seen a lot of things around here, and still kicking, still managing to survive out there. Streets getting tougher every day, but you get some good content. You get some people you trust, and you have appropriate expectations, and you can still have lots of fun here. So that's the important thing to remember for DFS. If it's just a source of constant frustration and anger, you may not want to do it, because this should be a fun thing.
And as for the Express Pass, because I'll add on, because my point being there is that you've been around the block, so that's why you did such an excellent job weaving that in. The thing that I do like to use the most with it, that I think is very important, that all the information comes with, the ownership projections are so huge for the one game showdown slates, because that's really where you find an edge. Especially if you look at the tool that Alex has in particular for the NFL showdown slates, where it's just a showdown tool where it's the projected ownership and then the projected percentage chance that a player has of being in the optimal lineup or being the top 2 to 6%. I really like that a lot. So that's my favorite thing that I like to use on the Awesemo site for one game slates.
Yeah, so you guys can get in on that. If you just want the Express package, it's $3.95 a week. No promo code, no tricks, no anything. There it is, $3.95 a week. All right, let's jump in here. Let's do a little baseball. We've got game 1 at 1:35. This is on most sites, although what slate it's attached to varies. So we're going to kind of go here with DraftKings. We have Alec Mills going against Chad Kuhl. Mills coming in at 9,200 on DK. Kuhl is at 7,400. This is going to be a 75-degree game. It is, again, as I mentioned, 1:30. This one is in Pittsburgh. No real wind to worry about here. 5.3 implied run total for the Cubbies. 3.8 for Chad Kuhl. Clearly, Mr. No-hitter Alec Mills is standing out. You like him, I'm sure. How do we want to attack Chad Kuhl? Take it away.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know what my answer is going to be. We've talked about Chad Kuhl in the past, and it's always the same case. Chad Kuhl is fairly decent against right-handed hitters. He does not pitch well at all against lefties. So that's the way to really attack him in this spot. It's it's a 2-game slate, so you can't say that any pitcher is totally out of play, although I'm still pretty tempted to say that Chichi Gonzalez isn't in play. So with that said, there's a 2-game slate with 4 pitchers, and Chad Kuhl is not the worst option. There's one option who's worse than him. That kind of puts him in play by default. If you're looking at the Cubs hitters, the lefties are definitely the way you want to go. Anthony Rizzo makes a ton of sense. Only 4,300. That is a cheap price for Anthony Rizzo in this matchup. I like him. But yeah, any lefties that make their way into the lineup are worth rostering. The other thing to consider too, we're at a point in the season where we don't really know what the lineups are going to be ahead in advance. We only have a few days left in the season. We see teams, punt games sometimes they rest players. So that's the other thing too, is that with a lot of these pitchers, they might be facing minor league-ish type lineups. So just always be on the lookout for what the lineups look like. Because even if there's a pitcher that you don't think is good and all of a sudden they're facing a bunch of hitters you've never heard of before and they don't have a track record in the major leagues, chances are it's a good matchup for them anyway.
Yeah, and we've seen the Nationals are a team that are officially out of it. So they have been putting up a ton of their young guys because most teams are not going, well, one, we don't have expanded rosters. Two, half the teams basically are making the playoffs, so there's still a lot of seeding, and then there's a lot of teams with the puncher's chance because they're coming back against their the other people that are on the playoff fringes. So teams like Philadelphia, they're not out of it. They got a 50-50 chance of making it. If they run the table, they're probably going to be in. So they're pulling out all the stops. Whereas other teams are just like, nah, we're good. Nobody got hurt. Let's not push it. let's limp home to the finish line. No harm, no foul, right? So that's what we're really going to see over the next 5 days. And Terry, T. McBee and I talked about that on the podcast and then on the show tonight. The other thing you want to watch out for, some of these prospects, these hitting prospects, really good. Like Stevens that has been leading off for the Nationals the last couple days, super duper cheap. The Phillies have had one guy that kind of sometimes makes the lineup that's also been pretty cheap. So and then Baltimore's got a whole bunch of them. Boston's starting to showcase a few of their guys because they're not in Pawtucket right now. This is the only game they've got. So that's where you can find these guys at 3,500 or below on DK, 2,500 or below on FanDuel, 10, 11 or 7, 8 on Yahoo. That helps us get in the expensive pitchers or the expensive hitters. So that's what we're going to want to look for over the next few days as we wrap up the season. And I guess really through Saturday, because Sunday everybody plays between 305 and 320. But last weekend, the sites combined had less than $70,000 in guaranteed prize pools for MLB. That includes FanDuel, DraftKings, and Yahoo.
So the other thing I'll say too is that there's going to be situations where we have to monitor the news in terms of just how long guys are going to play, even if they start. So, for instance, Wednesday night, Justin Turner, coming off the injured list, was in the Dodgers starting lineup, and they said he's going to play about 5 or 6 innings and come out. So there's going to be a lot of guys that we're going to want to avoid just because we find out that, hey, teams already locked into a playoff spot or maybe already eliminated. They don't really want to risk an injury with a veteran, and they're just saying, hey, we want to get this guy work. We want to get him some reps, but we're not going to leave him in the whole game. So anybody who we see is only playing, 5, 6 innings, that's somebody else to avoid.
All right. You mentioned Gonzalez here quickly to talk about him. This will be his 6th appearance of the season. 3rd against the Giants. He has been bouncing between the Rockies' alternative training site and here. In his last outing, he went 79 pitches at home against the Dodgers. So he is someone that is probably going to go 65, 70 pitches here. He's not been great. He has, over his last 159 righty-lefty matchups, a 1.6 home run per 9, almost a 16% walk rate, which is just absurd, and a 221 ISO. Righties have gotten to him for 1.7 home run per 9, 10% walk rate, and a 200 ISO. So he's just not good. Mike Yostremski's missed the last 5 games. He may pinch hit tonight. We haven't seen that game yet, but he's dealing with the calf injury. If he is in the lineup, we're going to want him in ours. I think he's got to be reasonably hurt because they haven't quite clinched their playoff chance. They're one of the teams on the edge. So if he's not playing, he must be hurt pretty good. But we can go to Brandon Bell, Alex Dickerson, Donovan Solano are the 3 I'm interested in. You want to do anything else with San Fran there, or how do you want to play the Rockies on the road?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you want to get some exposure to the lefties from the Giants, I'll say, because first on the Giants. From the Rocky side of the game, I think Kevin Gausman's in a really good spot. Actually, per dollar, I think that he's a better option than Alec Mills. Gausman has quietly had a really good season, and he's somebody who's been really hard to predict in the past, just because he's been such a high variance pitcher. Pretty consistently decent this year from a fantasy perspective, just because the strikeouts are so high. I mean, 3.76 ERA, 3.42 FIP, those are really solid numbers, but 11.62 strikeouts per 9 innings this season for Kevin Gausman. Those are really strong numbers for fantasy. And I'll bring up his fantasy point totals right now on DraftKings. 21, 30, 19, 15, 18, 24, 23, 16, 16 over his starts this year. He's been, totally without any kind of pitch restriction. He's been a really consistent fantasy option, and a Rockies team that doesn't hit right-handed pitching well. They don't hit well on the road. I think Kevin Gausman is the top pitching option on the slate, and he's a little bit mispriced here.
Yeah, and part of the reason is he missed a start there, sore elbow. He has had started since then against Oakland on the 19th, went 84 pitches, so totally fine. This will be the 3rd time he's facing the Rockies. He has 12 strikeouts against them in 10.1 innings. Pretty solid performance, 1.7 or 0.175 or a 175 batting average against, so pretty good.
By the way, before we get off of Gausman, just because I'm looking at his pricing so far this season, Pretty good argument to be made for top value pitcher of the season. So, given what his fantasy totals were that I just read off, what do you think has been his most expensive salary of the season before today?
8,500.
6,500
Wait, that was his most expensive?
or 6,600 for a game in cores. That was his most expensive. His most expensive non-cores game was 6,500.
Wow.
So a great season, and he was dirt cheap every single start this year.
Don't think we utilized him enough.
In hindsight, no.
All right, let's move on to the games in the 6 o'clock hour. Here's where we have a bunch of pitching hiding. That's going to cost us these opportunities on the main slate, but I'm going to throw some guys out here. You can say yay or nay. Pat Corbin, Hyun Ryu, they are, they're not going against each other. Got the wrong slate.
Corbin's pitching against the Mets. Ryu is pitching against the Yankees.
Perfect. Then we got Plesac going against the White Sox. You've got David Peterson for the Mets going against Washington. You have Dallas Keuchel going against Cleveland. And then Jordan Montgomery back in our lives once again going against Toronto. That's probably our order of preference, I guess, would be their price points there on DraftKings. I think Ryu is my favorite and Plesac. No, I'm going to have to say Corbin is my second favorite.
It's such a tough matchup for Ryu, though. So here's the deal. Depending what the Yankees do with their starting lineup, this could very well be a game where they sit Stanton, they sit Judge. If those guys are all in the lineup, I don't really want anything to do with Ryu most of the time. Again, I mean, those guys all crush left-handed pitching. Luke Voigt's had a great season. That is such a difficult lineup to manage in the middle. I'd be much more apt to go to Plesac because he's been very strong this year. He's averaging 26 DraftKings points per start. He's a 1.85 ERA. He only has one start all year below 18 fantasy points. So considering that and how consistent he's been, I think Plesac is my favorite option. In terms of second favorite option, I'll say this about David Peterson. I don't really love him as a fantasy option. However, the Nationals scratched Trey Turner from the lineup on Wednesday night right before the game. I think there is a pretty good chance that he doesn't play Wednesday. He might not even play the rest of the season. I think it also stands to reason the Nationals might rest some of their other regular guys at this point. I think that there's a chance that he pitches against a very, very weak lineup.
I believe I missed that scratched news there by Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Turner.
Did I just alert you to some of your lineups being dead without you knowing?
I'm gonna have to go check and see here. I was enjoying dinner and then I was writing an article, so I don't know. We'll see. This is why you need to have alerts turned on to your phone so you do not miss out on these. Let's see. I don't have him in my lineups. I lucked out there, and I'm playing all day slates. I'm playing everything they have. So that seems.
Yeah, he was
shocking.
scratched shortly before the Nationals game started, and I don't even think they've said what the cause is yet. So it's hard to know how serious the injury is, or if it's just a situation where the Nationals were just saying, "Hey, we want to ease up on Trey Turner the rest of the season." So who knows until we get more info.
Yeah, most definitely there. But these are the things we're going to want to watch out for. And it was interesting tonight, not to tangent too much on this, but this is how you need to approach some of these things. Tonight, we were talking on the show, some people were worried, what if some of these aces or top-end pitchers get pulled? Do you think their managers are going to push them? And my thought was, no, they're not. These are the guys that are most likely going to start the first or second game for their teams of the playoffs. This is going to be the last time they're going to pitch, unless they try to shoehorn them in on Sunday if they need to, if it's a make or break situation of getting in or not. For the guys across the board, we can say the same thing about the guys that are going to be going today on Thursday. After that, I don't know. We're now looking at like some third starters, maybe I haven't projected out all of the rotations yet. I could see some people getting skipped. I could see some people coming in and this is kind of their quote bullpen or long toss day or whatever, and they go 2 or 3 innings. That wouldn't shock me. I would suspect we'll have more news or thoughts on that, but that's just something to keep an eye on because everybody that was going on Wednesday and the people that are going on Thursday, they'll still have a day plus whatever their normal rest would be anyway before they're even going to pitch again, unless they go on shorter rest on Sunday, and that would be barely a day short for most of them. But just wanted to put that out there. But these are all good questions to ask and be cognizant of, but you want to kind of look at the standing. If it's a close matchup where they really can change seating or something like that, they're going to play. Are they going to throw 120 pitches? No. If they're usually throwing around 100, will they throw around 100? Probably. would be my guess. Most of these guys are insane. That's what I think of pitchers. The human body is not built to throw objects 100 miles an hour, and that's why we see all these injuries all the time. But there we go. That's what these guys are. Kind of rounding this little 6-gamer out, for as you said, Peterson has been pretty solid. He has allowed 1 home run in each of his last 3 games. However, he has allowed only 5 over 42 innings. That is pretty solid. That'd be 25 in a normal year, which for a young guy like this, that'd be phenomenal. His strikeouts not quite 1 per inning, about 0.8 per inning, 0.83. I'm just eyeballing it there, but everything else looks pretty good for him. Montgomery and Keuchel, unfortunately on DraftKings, we only got to play one of them because it's their single pitcher, 2 infielder, 2 outfielder, 2 utility format. So none of the sites, even on the all-day slates, are we going to have to play 2 from this group. So nothing to really force in there. Final thoughts on Corbin. Probably a guy we didn't quite talk enough about. This will most likely be his last start for the Nationals. He's had a decent year.
I mean, relative to expectations, it hasn't been a decent year because I think, he was slated.
He hasn't been hurt. They lost Strasburg. Scherzer's had moments of being injured. He hasn't been hurt. I'm going to put my Nationals hat on right now, and I'm going to tell you, if he makes it and he's healthy for the start of next year, it's going to be a good year.
Yeah, well, he scored more than 10 fantasy points once in his last 5 starts, and
don't let the facts get in the way.
And I think most people expect more from Patrick Corbin. So relative to some of the other pitchers on the slate, maybe he isn't terrible. But relative to his price, it's hard for me to justify rostering him given how much he's struggled lately, especially relative to expectations. So if he was priced down for some of his recent outings, then I would say yes. But I don't think he warrants the 11,800 price tag that he is in the short slate contest.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. You can also find a $3,000 batter that just makes it all moot point. I was leaving like $2,500 on the table a bunch of times when I was playing those short slates. I like to build hand build one lineup for each short slate just to see what it looks like. But there we go. All right, on to the main slate now. 6 games, all sides coalescing, coming back together here. This starts at 7:10. The next game is 7:30. Then we got a couple at 8:05, one at 8:15, one at 9:40. Why? Because there's NFL, and that's where all eyes will be. First game, we've got Miami at Atlanta. We've got Ian Anderson going for Atlanta. Pablo Lopez, who's been, well, I guess some would say better than Pat Corbin this year. What do you want to do to pitchers in this game?
So let's start with Ian Anderson because he is a somewhat well-regarded prospect. He has pitched pretty well this year. And given the other pitching options on the slate, he makes sense just because the matchup against the Marlins, maybe not as favorable as we thought it was coming into the season, but it's not like the Marlins are world beaters at all. I mean, they have a 92 WRC plus against right-handed pitching, so it's still a plus matchup. Ian Anderson came into the year one of the top prospects in the Braves organization. If you go to FanGraphs, he's ranked overall the 20th best prospect in baseball. If you look at his numbers so far this year, 2.36 ERA, a 2.84 FIP. He's striking out 11.81 hitters per 9 innings, so it looks like he has a pretty fantasy-friendly game. If you look at his minor league numbers, he was always double-digit strikeouts per 9 innings. So I look at Ian Anderson's price, and it does feel a little steep, but given the other options on the slate and the outlook here, I'm willing to pay the price.
All right. I do want to point out, so we could see things like this, like tonight, Max Fried kind of tweaked his ankle fielding a hit, and he finished out the inning but then did not come back out. The Braves have already said he's going to be fine. This was just completely precautionary. That is not a surprise to see with pitchers, because if they're even slightly favoring something, we know it mucks up mechanics and causes other issues with other parts of the body. This close to the end of the season, that would be a cause where I could see someone sitting early. So yes, the risk is heightened. I should acknowledge it that way. With that, do I think going into it, most of them are at this risk? No, but we just need to be aware of it.
Yeah, so I'll say this before we go on any farther to the next game. The way I'd approach this is if you play multiple lineups as both of us do, I wouldn't be too invested in one player. I think this is where it sets up to be a good time of the year to spread out your exposure a little bit, just because I think there's so many more factors that go into the last week of baseball season. Kind of like the last week of basketball season, week 17 of football season. There's a lot more unknown variables. And I don't think you want to be too invested in any one player, just because there's a lot of unknowns where somebody who's a top player on the slate could end up only pitching, 2 or 3 innings, and we won't know about it beforehand.
Yeah. Yep, that's fair. And like tonight with all the aces we had, I still had 7 pitchers with over 25% of exposure on DraftKings, where you've got to play 2, so your full exposure is going to be 200%. But the way I did it was I capped everybody at 30%, just because I didn't know what was going to happen. There was a lot of good options, and I need some of them to go sideways. So that usually works out better for me if I spread things out in situations like that. Our next game, a couple of mediocre pitchers. We have Alex Cobb going for Baltimore. We have Martin Perez going for Boston. So I said in my notes about Alex Cobb, I say Cobb is the perfect nondescript Orioles pitcher. Right? He fits the mold. He's right there. This is truly him. He has a 4.77 ERA this year, a 1.4 whip, 8 home runs allowed in 45 innings. In his last 469 matchups against same-handed batters, he has allowed a 2 home run per 9, a very low 14.7 K percentage, and a 252 ISO. Lefties have gotten to him for a 1.5 home run per 9, 16% strikeout rate, 190 ISO. Xander Bogaerts in his last 1,107 plate appearances against righties has a 240 ISO, 136 WRC plus. JD Martinez in his last 1,148 has a 235 ISO and a 131 WRC plus. I will be joining the masses on the Bo Sox. Do you want to consider either of these pitchers? Because as you just said, there are 12 on the slate. You and I like to play a lot of them. These guys feel like 15%ers to me.
Yeah, I don't really like either of them. The issue I have is there's just a lack of fantasy upside here. Martin Perez has actually been kind of decent lately, but still, he's not somebody I like to make a target of rostering in DFS. He has 44 strikeouts in 58 innings this year. He just doesn't really get a lot of whiffs. That's an issue for me for fantasy upside. Generally, even if he pitches well for Martin Perez, it's typically not enough for him to win a GPP. So something else you've mentioned with Martin Perez in the past, though, he's not somebody who typically gets blown up a lot either. So it's kind of a spot where I have more interest in the Baltimore side of the game than I do Martin Perez, but I'm not sure that either side is necessarily great for DFS purposes. And then we look at Alex Cobb. It's a somewhat decent matchup against the Red Sox just because they haven't been good this year as expected after getting rid of Mookie Betts. They've been, let's see, what is their WRC plus against right-handed pitching at? It was really weak earlier in the season. I think they've improved a little bit as the year's gone. They're up to 107 WRC plus now, so slightly above average against righties. It's a tough enough matchup where I don't want to roster Alex Cobb. He's been under 10 DK fantasy points in, let's see, 5 of his last 6 starts. He's one start with 15 fantasy points. That's been his ceiling lately. And even 15 isn't enough to win a GPP. It's enough to be an okay play, but more often than not, he's getting shelled.
All right, our next one, Detroit at KC. I'll let you talk about Chris Bubeck. He is a decent pitcher that we will want to give some time to. The Motor City Kitties here are going with a righty-lefty combo, Michael Fulmer and Tyler Alexander. Fulmer the righty, Alexander the lefty. Kansas City has a 5.3 implied run total. Fulmer and Alexander each capable of going about 50 pitches. I really like Adalberto Mondesi. In his last 10 games, he has 4 extra base hits, 7 stolen bases. He leads the league with 20 steals. Trevor Story is second with 14. I just point that out because there have not been many steals at all this year. I think you can look to Jorge Soler and Salvador Perez. They both have excellent power against righties and lefties. And then Hunter Dozier and Maikel Franco, of course, better against lefties. But they're farther down the lineup, so maybe they'll have a better chance of getting more at-bats against Anderson than they will have to against Fulmer. And then Whit Merrifield leading off, kind of interesting at $5,300 on DraftKings. How many people are going to go there? I don't know. Probably about as many as go to Salvador Perez at a similar price point. That covers that side. What do you want to do with a Bubeck?
Yeah, so Bubeck is kind of interesting because I mean something that you may have noticed. I roster the Tigers a decent amount of time against left-handed pitching. Actually, one of the better slates I had all season was we had a slate like 3 Sundays ago. Rich Hill pitched against the Tigers. Rich Hill was somewhat popular that slate, and the Tigers like a 1% on stack, and they absolutely smashed Rich Hill, which wasn't that surprising to me for this reason. The Tigers have a 138 WRC plus against left-handed pitching this year. That is second in all of baseball, only behind the Chicago White Sox. The Tigers have crazy splits this year. They have one of the worst offenses in baseball against right-handed pitching, one of the best offenses in baseball against left-handed pitching. Now, some of this is a little bit of a sample size issue because we have a shortened season, and the reality probably lies somewhere in between. They're probably not as bad against righties as they've shown this year. They're probably not as bad against lefties as they've shown so far this year. However, there's still kind of this stink around the Tigers where people just assume they suck all the time and they never want to roster them. And I still think they're a team with a decent amount of upside against lefties. They never cost anything. So you could generally stack the Tigers with whatever pitchers you want. And that's a strategy I utilize a ton because especially as you know, I like to spend up for pitchers. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Stack the Tigers against lefties and then you pay up for pitching. Chris Bubeck is an okay pitcher. Very middle of the road, 3.97 ERA this year, 4.35 FIP, strikes out under a hitter per inning. I don't have all that much interest in him for DFS. I like the Tiger side of this game a lot. We don't have ownership at this point, obviously, because we're recording this on Wednesday evening. But I assume the Tigers are not going to have that much ownership, and they're going to be my favorite GPP stack.
I do remember that Sunday because you said multiple times on the show and even messaged me the Tigers are going off, and you had said I just need the Tigers to go off, and then you had mixed and matched every other expensive combination of pitchers, and you're just like I just need two in the same lineup, and if the Tigers go off, I'm gonna have a nice day.
Yeah, and I remember saying that it was based on their prices. As long as they scored 4 or 5 runs, I would be thrilled. And then they ended up scoring like 12 runs against Richard, which I was not expecting at all, which is really funny too because not to get too far off, but there is always this thing where if you have somebody who plays really well and people go like, oh, great projection. And it's like, well, if I say a team's going to score 5 runs and they're projected for 4 runs and they score 12 runs, I wasn't necessarily right either. I just happened to point out a spot that I thought was being undervalued and they came through, but being off by 7 runs on a team's projection isn't necessarily meaning that you were accurate either.
All right. Have you ever heard of we're on to our next game here. It's the Rangers and Houston. Have you ever heard of the 13-run game? The game you can play in baseball. Yeah, I didn't think so. I'm going to explain it to you. Terry actually knew what it was and had played it before.
I have no clue what you're talking about.
Basically what you do is with a few buddies, you each pick a team or a few teams in Major League Baseball, and whoever's team scores and checks the box between 0 and 13, so they score 12 in a game, they score 3 in a game, they get shut out, they score 13. Whoever scores those 14 numbers, because 0 through 13 is 14, at first wins, right? It's a fun game. Teams are never really out of it because it's baseball. At some point, you're getting, an 11 or a 12-run game, right? Just because. How many times do you think the Texas Rangers have scored more than 8 runs this year?
Geez, off the top of my head, I can't remember them scoring 5 runs in a game this year. Let's see. I'm gonna say 2.
The answer is 0.
Here's the thing: is
through 56 games, 0. They've scored 8 once, and then they've scored 6. I looked this up the other day. I think they've scored 6 like 6 times. That's it. Those were their totals.
It's funny because I'm going, boy, it feels like they suck every day. You know why? Because they do. So,
they do.
So there's the answer.
Because Terry and I were like, oh my God. Because he's like, yeah, there's been years where I'm like, hey, I got the Orioles. I don't care. At least I know that I'm going to get the numbers between 1 and 7 pretty covered, But anyway, there we are. Yeah, that's horrible.
So anyway, the moral of the story here, roster pitchers against them.
And this is for you, Christian Javier. What do you want to do?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at Javier's numbers, he's greatly outperformed his peripheral stats. He's a 184 BABIP this year, which is in no way sustainable. However, like you said, it's a matchup against the Rangers. The Rangers have faced all kinds of bad pitchers this year. Even with Javier, we expect some regression. It's not like he stinks or anything like that. He's still a guy that I expect to have an ERA somewhere in the 4 range, and he's just gotten a little lucky this year. But he strikes out about a hitter per inning. Terrific strikeout numbers in the minor leagues. He was somebody, I mean, you look back at him in Double-A last year, almost 14 strikeouts per 9 innings, 2018, 14 and a half strikeouts per 9 innings. So still, it looks like he should have a fairly fantasy-friendly game. And you look at the Rangers have faced good pitchers this year, bad pitchers, mediocre pitchers, lefties, righties, and they've sucked every single time. So there's no reason to think that now, with a week left in the season, they're all of a sudden going to start hitting. I'm willing to roster just about any pitcher against the Rangers at this point, and Christian Javier is pretty cheap.
Yeah, I think he's in play on all sides. Just now, granted, in his last couple, he's gone. Let's see, 77 pitches, 4 innings, 35 pitches, 2 innings. But before that, 94 pitches, 93 pitches, 89 pitches, 78 pitches, 88 pitches. So he's stretched out enough that at that price point, we're totally comfortable with him going around 80 pitches. Seems reasonable with upside to 90. So I feel good about that. Lance Lynn on the other side, tough ask at this price point. He's had a phenomenal year. He has gone at least 107 pitches in, 105 pitches in every start this year. He is averaging, let's see, looks like just shy of 108 pitches per game. That's amazing. He has allowed 10 home runs. He's gone 78 innings. That's got to be among the league leaders this year. 2.5 ERA, less than a base runner per inning. Just over a strikeout, 1.1 strikeouts per inning. It's going against Houston, though. I don't feel great about it. It's in Texas. Most likely the roof will be closed. They've only had it open twice all year. Once was against the Mariners in August because they just hadn't opened it and wanted to see what it would be like. And then I think it was it one of the last weekend or the weekend before they also opened it. So that's kind of been it. Their default position is they said, yeah, we're just going to keep it closed for the time being. What do you want to do with Lance Lynn? Because we don't have that many more pitchers to go.
Yeah, I kind of like Lance Lynn. He's been really safe this year, and he was really safe last year also. And there's a couple of reasons why. Not only is he a solid starting pitcher, it's not like he's somebody who strikes out 11 hitters per nine or anything like that. But he doesn't give up a whole lot of hard contact, and he works really deep into games. And if you look at his pitch count dating back to last year, he's a guy who's an absolute workhorse. He doesn't have a single start this year with under 100 pitches. Let's see, the least amount of pitches he's thrown to start this year is 102. He's actually been over 110 pitches over the last month, more times than he's been below it. So when you have a pitcher who's working that deep into games, I mean, that's extra fantasy points. He's working to the 7th, 8th inning of more starts than he isn't. So for that reason, I mean, you look at the Houston Astros, even though they're, a daunting offense on paper and they're finally getting healthy, it's only a 98 WRC plus for the season. It's not like they've been some ridiculously hard matchup this year. I mean, we could talk about whatever trash can stuff, cheating, all that we want. Does it have a factor? Is it playing a factor or not? I'm not totally sure, but the Astros haven't been crushing this year like they have in the past. And I think that's something we have to consider. So Lance Lynn at his price and given the other options on the slate, I think that he's a pretty solid option.
All right, 4 to go here. We've got Corbin Burns, who has been nothing short of outstanding. Over his last 5 starts, he has double-digit strikeouts in 3 of them. He is averaging, 8.7 in those starts. He has allowed exactly 1 home run this season in 56 innings.
He's been ridiculous.
That is even more impressive than I'm going to say it's even more impressive than the 0 home runs that Fried had coming into tonight's game. So, yeah, he's 8,400. This guy's going to probably be 60% on DK would be my guess, 55 at least. On the other side, we have Kwang Hong Kim, who has been interesting. His pitch count, 103, 87, 85, 80, 83. And then prior to that, he was just kind of getting stretched out, 57 and 19. He is just 7,800 on DraftKings. I think he is absolutely viable against Milwaukee. I think it's, they've been a little bit better against lefties than righties, but they've been kind of a dumpster fire from time to time just because they don't have any depth this year. I think both these guys are viable. This one's in St. Louis, and we are looking at game time temperatures of 70 degrees. Your thoughts?
It's hard to really say too much about Corbin Burns just because he's so obvious. He's way underpriced, right? He should be so much more expensive given how well he's pitched this year. I mean, he's a guy who, if you play in yearly leagues, Corbin Burns wasn't even drafted this year. And if he was a starter to open the year, he'd be right in the Cy Young conversation because I think there's a good case to be made that he's been the 4th best pitcher in the National League this year. You've got Bauer, Darvish, and DeGrom in a tier of their own. Corbin Burns has been right there. I think he's been the next best guy. 1.77 ERA, and not even luck involved. 1.78 FIP to go along with that 1.77 ERA. The walk numbers are in check this year. Like you said, he's not giving up home runs. 38.6% home run to fly ball rate last year, 2.6% this year, 13.34 strikeouts per 9 innings. And you look at this stuff, it matches the eye test because he looks unhittable and the numbers back it up also. Corbin Burns is the best pitching option on the slate. And it's just hard for me to say anything too contrarian off that because the pricing's just off on him. Then we talk about Kwang Hong Kim. I don't think he's as viable as you do. And here's the reason why. He's in that mid-range price tier, and there just aren't enough strikeouts for me. He does have the low ERA, but he's only striking out 5.56 hitters per 9 innings. He's walking. He's striking out only twice as many guys as he walks. The peripheral stats don't back up the ERA. He's a 3.97 FIP, a 4.52 xFIP. We're just looking at a guy who's had a lot of BABIP luck and a really small sample size. He's only thrown 34 innings. So I look at how low his strikeout rate is. And to me, he's a guy who's headed for regression. I actually think that the Brewers make more sense as a contrarian stack, and I think Kim makes sense as a play himself.
All right, moving along. Final game of the night. Walker Bueller coming off the injured list. He was dealing with a blister on his finger. He is $10,000 on DraftKings. Going against Oakland. My answer to this is, yeah. He had a 90-pitch simulated game on Saturday. This is from the blurb on DK here. I would also like to point out that would be the second most pitches he's thrown all season if that were in a game. He has top 90 once with 92, 61, 71, 92, 89, 87, 79, 56. At this price point, he's not out of play, but it doesn't feel great. But we could get some cheapies in other lineups. In decent positions that will facilitate this, and like normal September baseball, make pricing essentially irrelevant. But we'll have to see because we don't know what's going to appear. On the other side, you got Mike Fiers, who has allowed 1 home run in his last 5 starts. I applaud that because I think he's 5th overall since the beginning of the 2018 season. So
yeah,
Fiers. You remember Beavis and Butthead, right?
I never really watched Beavis and Butthead. I watched more like The Simpsons, okay. South Park. Those were the cartoons I watched when I was younger. So I'm not as familiar with Beavis and Butthead.
All right. Well, that's how he says Fiers. In any event,
I would like to get your reference. So I'm gonna give it. Yeah, I always find this annoying. You know, if you go out to dinner with somebody and you say something that they think is funny, but somebody just doesn't laugh and they just go, "Oh, that's funny," but I kind of have to give that response to you because I don't get the reference, but I understand that it's supposed to be funny. So I'll say, yeah, that's funny, EMac. I just don't get it.
That's absolutely fine. In any event, as I'm tearing up here because I feel sad, Walker Bueller, Mike Fiers, final duo of the night. Any words of wisdom to hand out to our loyal listeners?
Stack the Dodgers as for with Walker Bueller goes, because Mike Fiers, like you said, he hasn't given up home runs recently, but we have how many years can we go back and see that Mike Fiers, the guy, gives up a ton of home runs, right? We could go back and look at basically his entire career and we see that he's a high home run pitcher. He's going up against one of the best offenses in baseball. This is a great spot for the Dodgers. I think they're the best high end stack on the slate, and I assume they're going to be the offense that garners the most ownership, assuming that there's nothing crazy where they're resting a bunch of guys. As for Walker Bueller, I don't buy that he's going to work deep into the game. The Dodgers have been so cautious with all their starting pitchers all year that it feels to me he's going to pitch 75, 80 pitches. I could be wrong. Maybe we get better information tomorrow, and it's definitely something I'm going to want to pay attention to the beat reporters on in terms of what his pitch restriction is going to look like. I find it hard to believe that Walker Bueller, right before the playoffs, Dodgers already locked into their playoff spot, and they're going to give him 100+ pitches, let him work 6, 7 innings. I don't think that's a realistic outcome.
Mike Fiers, since the beginning of 2018, has 70 home runs allowed. That comes in at 3rd for all pitchers during that stretch. There we are.
Stack the Dodgers.
Stack the Dodgers. All right, final thoughts. What do we got for content from you on Thursday? Anything exciting? Some articles here, some NFL, some NBA. What do we got?
Yeah, I'll be writing about the NBA, the showdown slate, given my building blocks article. Which, let me say, at this point of the season, it does get a little tiresome to write about the same games every other day, because every day I'm writing it and I'm always stressed. Be like, all right, I have to find a way to not write about the same exact guys I wrote about 2 days ago. But it's really hard because I like the same guys I did 2 days ago, because it's the same players and the same matchups, and the sites don't change the pricing.
No, that completely makes sense. The only thing that changed for me last night was Anthony Davis sucked. I always have been picking him over LeBron, and it's worked out nicely because those few extra $100 or $1,100, whatever it ends up being on each slate, have been well served going elsewhere. It just didn't work out for me last night, so tis what it is. But we'll be back. We'll be back. We've got they're on the slate, right? Coming up. I've lost track of days now. Yeah, they're on Thursday. All right. With that, gamers, good luck.